Is sobriety non-binary? Hello, welcome to Sobriety Bestie. I am Kirsten, and this video is about looking at, is sobriety non-binary? So we're going to start off by looking at what is binary thinking, what are the possible problems or some of the possible problems with binary thinking, sobriety categories to consider, my perspective on these so-called sobriety categories, and staying out of harm's way. So let's dive right in. Binary thinking is also called dichotomous thinking or black and white thinking. It's like yes or no, this or that. There is no gray, there is no nuance, there is no spectrum. It's all or nothing, light or dark. Often it can be an oversimplified way to look at something complex because in life there are a lot of nuances. In sobriety, I believe there are a lot of nuances. And so some of the problems with this binary thinking is that if we don't fall into the right category, we might feel a lot of shame. We might feel a lot of guilt. We might judge other people if they don't fall into our idea of our own binary thinking around something, whether it's sobriety or something else. So there's a lot of room here for freedom. There's a lot of room here for self-love. There's a lot of room here for choosing your own path and doing something that feels aligned with the truth of who you are. And to me, that's what sobriety is. It's about living in alignment with the truth of who we are from the depth, right? From our heart, from our spirit, from our intuition, from that inner guidance. I also believe that nuanced thinking gives us a better perspective of the world. We can see reality more as it is than versus how we kind of box it up. A lot of times the binary thinking can also be due because of fear. We might be afraid of something, therefore it's all good or all bad. In reality, things aren't all good or all bad. Sometimes they're good or there's good things about something, and sometimes there's bad or there's bad things about something. There's something I want to drop here too. It's just something to think about. I don't want this video to be super technical and neuroscience filled, right? I want to keep it real kind of simple here and just kind of an overview because I think that by exploring this topic in depth, I think hopefully, I'm making this for the person who feels a little judged or shamed about how they're living their life and they feel like they're sober and maybe their sober friends don't agree with them or judge them. I've also gotten a lot of comments and you can look through my YouTube channel, right? I did a whole playlist called Psychedelics and Sobriety. And so there's a lot of people who have dichotomous thinking who are using their dichotomous thinking to shame other people. And look, if you had a problem with alcohol and if you were anything like me or any kind of flavor of alcohol, whether it was alcohol use disorder, mild, moderate, or severe, and you aren't drinking anymore or you were drinking a lot less, and your life is better because of it, because you're drinking less or because you're not drinking at all, that's a huge win. I mean, fuck everybody else and their opinions, right? That's a huge win. That is a big deal. The villain here is alcohol. The villain is not somebody who has a different view than us. Where did that energy come in? And so it's a success if we are not drinking. And if you're not drinking because it was destroying your life, like this is amazing. So anyways, back to the point about not being super neuroscience-y, but wanting to drop something here a little scientific. So there's something in our brain called the reward circuit, and it, very, very high level view here, dopamine can be released when we are using certain substances, right? So some substances, whether they are drugs, whether they are involved in sobriety, whether they are whatever they're categorized as, some of the things that we can do, behaviors or ingest that affect our dopamine, including alcohol, right? So that's how alcohol works in the brain. It does release of a couple of things, right? But dopamine is released. Nicotine, chocolate, caffeine. So right now, releasing some dopamine. Social media, sugar, gambling, orgasm, THC. So there are a lot of different things that we can do with our brain to hit on that reward pathway that is known. If you Google addiction or you already know about addiction, there are certain pathways in our brain that are known to be involved in that. And so there are many different ways that we can access that so-called reward system within our brain and release dopamine. Okay, so categories to consider. Number one is mind-altering food and beverages. That's why I was making the joke with you about the coffee, because there are a lot of beverages and foods that we can ingest that are obviously going to change how we feel. And that might be the reason why we're doing it, right? I'm drinking a coffee because it's morning and I want to be alert while I make this video for you. I also would want to drink a coffee any morning anyways, just because that's what I like. I like to drink coffee and I have no problem with that. It doesn't, in my opinion, affect my sobriety. I don't consider it a relapse, even though it is working on some of the same areas of the brain that alcohol used to when I used to drink alcohol back in 2009 and earlier. Okay, so we got coffee, we got chocolate, tea, energy drinks, soda. There are a lot of other things there, but so as far as mind-altering foods and beverages, I think we have a decision to make. And I think most people would consider themselves sober, even if they were using one of those substances to alter how they feel. And this is non-judgmental. This video isn't, I'm not putting any judgment in any of these categories here. I just been thinking about this actually for a couple of months. I drew this whole, like, it's like a star, right? Like there's a center point and that's like you or me. And then there's all these different, like there's about 11 different legs, tentacles, things coming off, like I guess like an octopus, right? Tentacles coming off, like all these different things, like foods that affect our mood, right? And then what about other things? And so the second thing that I was considering about this is sobriety really non-binary, or is it more nuanced? And my view is that it's nuanced. Okay, neurotropics or supplements really. So that would be number 2 is supplements. For example, L-theanine. That's a supplement that a friend of mine recommended a couple of years ago. I bought some, I took some, and I felt kind of high. You know, I felt a little bit different. I mean, I guess I feel kind of high right now from the coffee, right? So what does that even mean? And is that a threat to your sobriety? Is that a threat to your well-being? And so L-theanine definitely, I think I took it like 2 or 3 times and I felt a huge buzz from it. Now, I wouldn't consider that breaking my sobriety or a relapse, but that's, you know, it's a supplement. There's other cognitive enhancers too. There are other supplements that affect dopamine, that help boost dopamine in the brain. To me, I think these are good things. And then again, it's like, what does it even mean to be sober? What is sobriety? Where do you draw the line? So some examples of supplements that help boost dopamine are probiotics, fish oil, magnesium, ginkgo, ginseng, and vitamin D. And so for the third category, over-the-counter drugs. So over-the-counter drugs here, for example, I'm considering NSAIDs, so non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs. These are pain relievers. Think aspirin, Tylenol, ibuprofen, and naproxen. Now, these things don't affect the brain in the same way that like coffee would or that cocaine would, right? But they definitely affect the brain. They relieve pain. If you have a headache and you take one of these, they're definitely going to affect how you feel. So number 4, over-the-counter substances that are a little bit more strong, right? So for here, I put, it's called DMX or dextromethorphan, Robitussin. Think Robitussin. Like back in the day when I used to go to raves, decades before I got sober, there was something called robo-tripping, where people would drink a lot of Robitussin, which is a cold medicine or a cough syrup. You can get these over the counter. They're cough suppressants, and people would drink high doses of Robitussin and get high, and it was called robo-tripping. Maybe the kids these days are still doing it, or the grown-ups. So that's something to consider. Like, do you take over-the-counter cough medicines? Number 5 is prescriptions. I know that there are some people, some niches of recovery who consider prescriptions that you can't be on prescription drugs and be sober. And I would just say, be cautious about if your doctor tells you to take something and somebody who's not your doctor tells you not to take it, that's kind of crazy making. I think, you know, I don't think doctors are right all the time, and I've been misled by doctors for sure. But I think that we got to find doctors that we can trust, that we can kind of work with them and collaborate on our own mental health and our recovery and our well-being. And so if we have the privilege to have a solid doctor, I think that that's the way to go. These prescriptions can include things like benzodiazepines, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And then there's antibiotics, which may or may not go along with surgery, right? So if you have surgery, you might be given antibiotics in an IV along with anesthesia. And then afterwards, there might be opioids, Vicodin or Percocet or something like that. The 6th category is CBD and THC. Category 7 is psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. So psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine, LSD. Category 8, plant medicine in ceremony, medicinal use of plants within a context of a ceremony. So this again might be psilocybin mushrooms. It might be iboga or ayahuasca. Whether the doctor is like a shaman or whether the doctor is an American medical doctor or some sort of spiritual doctor or something like that. So recreational drugs could be those same substances, but used in a recreational context. So that might mean that you don't drink alcohol anymore, but you're using cocaine. You don't drink alcohol, but you use MDMA, whether it's like once or twice a year, right? Or every day. I don't think you could. Recreational drugs could include cannabis, psychedelics, opioids, benzos, cigarettes, vaping. I think that they would go in this category. I kind of wanted to put them in their own category, but that is a recreational drug. You can even argue that caffeine and chocolate go in here as recreational drugs. So there's so many nuances to this. 10, a category for process addictions. So if you're sober from alcohol and you're doing process addictions, what does that mean? So maybe the process addiction is gambling, food, sex, Netflix, or social media, or another process. Codependency, people say that's an addiction. And then 11 would be alcohol at all in any quantity or capacity. So this could include things like kombucha, mouthwash, or ingesting anything that has alcohol in it, tiramisu. So we start to see, like when we dig into this, that it's a lot more nuanced than just yes or no, right? It's like, where do you draw the line? We all, like if we're sober and we're not drinking alcohol anymore, and that's why you're watching this video, then there's a line that we draw somewhere with each of these things. We make a decision with each of these things. Where do we feel safe? Where are we out of harm's way? Where do we draw that line for us? And so for me, like me walking through this, number one, mind-altering foods and beverages, obviously I'm okay with chocolate and coffee. Supplements, totally fine. Non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs. I prefer not to use these actually. I have no problem. I wouldn't consider anybody who takes an Advil or a Tylenol relapsing or not sober. I just prefer not to take these. That's just what I do. I feel like one of the gifts of sobriety for me has been being more in touch with my body and learning how to use my consciousness to alleviate pain. I had a lot of pain about 2-3 years sober. I had an injury that I ended up having surgery for, right? And I learned in that because I was in so much chronic pain. Well, first I couldn't drink to cover up the pain, right? Because alcohol was great before to cover up pain, physical pain. But then they had me taking Advil, like all this Advil every day, and it tore apart my stomach after a couple of weeks. So I stopped taking Advil, and I probably take it maybe one time a year, if even that. Will I take a Tylenol or an Advil? It's less than one time a year will I take anything like that. I don't have a judgment around it. I have just found, like specifically if you're watching this and you menstruate, right? Like when I have my cramps, I've just learned to do like a meditation with it. I learned to bring my consciousness into my cramps and slowly relax my muscles, slowly relax my womb space, slowly relax my uterus, right? And I do that. It takes about a half an hour to completely for all the pain to go away. And also, if I was going to take an Advil for the same pain, it would take about a half an hour for that to kick in. So I prefer to use my consciousness to transmute and transform how I view my pain. This is probably a topic for another video. But that's how I think about that. I wouldn't consider it a relapse, but I'd rather use my consciousness to alleviate pain if and where possible. Robo-tripping, absolutely, to me, that's off the charts for me. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't even take Robitussin or cough suppressants, just in general in sobriety. Like I'm just not into it. I guess I gotta have a weird or a divergent view of health and stuff. I'm really into self-healing. So I'm not one who's to reach to all these different substances anymore, right? I mean, I'm sober, so of course I used to. And that's just my personal opinion, right? I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm just sharing like how I view these things. Prescriptions, I'm absolutely okay to use any prescription that my doctor feels that I should use. I might not go with what they say. I might do my own research or get a second opinion. I've been prescribed things like benzos before from doctors who I was told they were not addictive. That is not true. I have a whole benzo playlist on YouTube, right? Because they're quite addictive. They were very hard to get off of. So, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with antibiotics, although I prefer not to take them. I'm okay with anesthesia if I'm having surgery. I'm okay with being prescribed opioids if I have surgery. The first time I had surgery in sobriety, I was on, I don't remember if it was Vicodin or Percocet, but I took them for about like 8 or 9 days afterwards. And then I kind of after that point, I felt like I'll just deal with the pain because I was getting it started feeling triggering. It started feeling like I was messed up, that I wasn't sober. Not that I considered that a relapse, but I just started feeling like I'm not right. My emotions aren't right. My thinking isn't right. And so I just, I didn't finish the 2 weeks of that. I stopped after, before I finished the pills. And the second time I had surgery in sobriety was just like 1.5 years ago. I was prescribed again. I don't know if it was Vicodin or Percocet. I have no history with an addiction with these substances. I just don't like them. Like literally my brain doesn't gravitate towards that. It was never my drug of choice. It was never something that like I vibed with. So to me, it doesn't feel like it's a threat to activating anything within me that would want more of that substance. It doesn't feel dangerous to me to take Vicodin after a surgery. But after this last surgery, I took one before I went to bed. Like the doctor said, you don't want to wake up in a lot of pain. You're going to go home still under the pain medication that we gave you during the surgery. So whatever they put in the IV, I don't know. But you don't want to wake up in the middle of the night in all of this pain. So take one before you go to bed no matter what. I did. And then I was up for like 2 hours feeling the effects of it, and I hated it. So the next day I didn't take any. I took extra strength Tylenol for the next 2 days. And then I just used my consciousness, my mind, to alleviate my pain. And when I say that, what I mean, if you're curious, is I literally just like close my eyes and I bring my mind into the sensations inside my body that feel like painful, or that I would have called painful before. I completely transformed my relationship with pain and sobriety. You know, now that I don't have alcohol to alleviate my pain, it's like I have my consciousness. And so I don't even really use the word pain anymore. It's like not my vocabulary. So if there is a sensation in my body that I don't prefer, I bring my mind into it. I go and I be with it. And I've learned that when I do that, when I bring my consciousness, like if this is the pain, when I bring my consciousness into the pain, it's like it disintegrates. It might not be gone completely, but it's less intense always, every time than it used to be. So I'll just leave that there. Maybe let me know in the comments if you want to know more about that, or maybe that was enough for you to like get the vibe of what I'm saying with that. As far as CBD and THC and being California sober, look, I think it's great. I'm not, like, I have never used CBD or THC in sobriety. I haven't smoked pot since the 90s. Like, it's been a hot minute for me, right? But I have no problem. I know actually a lot of people, I'm real proud of them. They're real proud of themselves. They no longer drink alcohol. Alcohol was destroying their lives, their marriage, their family, their work, whatever. And they smoke pot every night, or they do THC gummies or CBD gummies. CBD, to me, CBD, in my opinion, remember, I'm a chick on YouTube. I'm not a doctor. To me, CBD is the same as like probably tea, chocolate. Like it's like not a thing. That's how I look at it. Where THC is having a different effect on the brain. But if someone's taking THC or doing gummies for pain relief, and that's not what their problem was, or that they found a way to smoke pot on occasion or even nightly and they're not drinking, that's a huge win. Remember, the villain here isn't people who think differently than us, whether you're judging someone or someone's judging you. The villain is alcohol. If we're getting sober because alcohol destroyed our life, that's the villain. The villain is alcohol. And it does touch different parts of our brains. So we need to be smart about this, right? Let's not just, you know, decide that we can take ecstasy every weekend and that's not a problem. Or maybe it isn't a problem. You know, I don't know. And so the next one is psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. Now, this is a new thing that wasn't really around as far as I know in 2009 when I got sober, but I think it's great. I think ketamine assisted therapy, it sounds great. I love the research that I read about how ketamine can actually help people get sober because it brings their brain into a certain place, and with the right kind of therapy, while their brain is in that receptive spot of during the therapy, they can actually rewire their brain. And people tend to drink less or drink not at all after that specific kind of therapy. I think it's a tremendous win. And I'm really excited about the research on that. Again, I haven't done ketamine since like the 90s, so I haven't done any of this stuff in a while, but I'm very open to people who use it for therapeutic reasons. I think it's a godsend, right? These chemicals that can help people resolve trauma and even get sober in the first place. Psilocybin mushrooms, I haven't done them since the 90s. It's been a hot minute, but I think they're great. I think that the research that I've read about them, I think if people use them again to resolve trauma, same with MDMA and LSD. If people are using these in the context of therapy, you know, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, I think that's great. I don't think, in my view, that it breaks sobriety. I think it actually strengthens sobriety, which might sound controversial to some people, right? Depending upon your view and how binary you are in your thinking about sobriety. But I think that there's a lot of things under our drinking that contributed to the fact that we became addicted in the first place and continued to the point of destruction, if that's where it led you, that these psychedelic assisted psychotherapy can really help with. So then we go to, and I've not done any of that, but I'm open to it. I would I'm definitely open to do MDMA-assisted psychotherapy with internal family systems when they pair this together. I don't know if you've heard of internal family systems. It is my favorite kind of therapy. So give that a quick Google. I should probably make a whole video about it. I'm not a therapist, but I love to do these therapy trainings because I'm a nerd. And so I've done a couple of full-on trainings into internal family systems, and it's a way to process and resolve trauma that rewires your brain because it uses the viscera, like the gut, the viscera and the visual cortex. It uses the parts of the brain that resolve trauma. So when they do that in the context of MDMA, my understanding from the research is that the MDMA helps you have more empathy for yourself and compassion for those parts of yourselves that were wounded in the past, like in childhood, and that this type of specific therapy, I'm getting the chills, can really set your brain up for to heal, to resolve it, to move you through something, to let it go for freedom, so that you can actually don't need alcohol, right? So it can help you not relapse because you've resolved the things that were the pain that you were drinking over. So I'm really excited about that. When I say that I'm excited about MDMA with internal family systems in the context of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, I don't mean taking it at a club, although I also don't judge that. I wouldn't do that, but I don't judge that. And then, so 8, plant medicine in a ceremonial context, right? It's all about set and setting. So I think using psilocybin mushrooms, obviously, if you've seen my channel, you know that I did ayahuasca in November, so about 5 months ago now. I went and did ayahuasca retreat in Peru. I did 4 ceremonies. And to me, when you're using psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca or iboga, these plant medicines in the context of a ceremony with a healer, a shaman, a non-traditional doctor, essentially. I think that what I've seen in the research, and I can also speak to my own experience. If you haven't seen those videos, I made a series of videos. I don't recommend this stuff. I recommend trusting yourself. And if what you're guided to do is one of these things, I think that's amazing. I think you gotta trust yourself. So it's not about what I do, and it's not about what I say, and it's not about what anybody else does or what anybody else says. I think it's ultimately about, now here's my dogma, right? I think it's about trusting ourselves. That's what I think the sobriety journey is about. Trusting like that small, still voice within, trusting when we feel the chills, trusting when we feel led, trusting when we feel guided, and doing those things to heal and evolve and grow. So yeah, so I have no problem with that. I wouldn't consider that a relapse. I don't consider myself having relapse, having done ayahuasca, at 13 years sober. And if someone else does, that's fine. I'm not really concerned with what other people think about me. It doesn't affect me. I'm not drinking alcohol. That's my problem. That's what I don't do. I haven't had a drink since 2009. So depending upon your worldview or how binary you are in your sobriety view, I'm either 5 months sober or 13 and a half years sober, right? It doesn't matter to me. Alcohol was my villain, and I'm successfully not participating in alcohol anymore. I also think, so sobriety to me is different than recovery. And recovery, I made a video about recovery from alcohol. And if you look at the research and like what the National Institute on Health says about recovery, is you can be recovered from alcohol use disorder and still drink alcohol. Alcohol use disorder is considered mild, moderate, and severe. For me, in my perspective, I feel like I probably would have been severe if they had that scale, that spectrum when I was, getting sober. I would have been severe. And it feels like to me, it's not safe for me to drink at all, so I don't. That's my decision. That's my choice. I've created a life without alcohol. When it comes to recreational drugs, I have no judgment here on other people. If somebody is using cocaine once a month and they're not drinking alcohol and alcohol is their problem and that works for them, that's great. That I've never even used cocaine. I have no judgment on that. It's not my life. I'm not going to use it. That's my decision. For me is that there are certain substances that I will use recreationally. And right now there's 2. It's chocolate and caffeine. That's it. So those would be considered. When I first got sober, I also used tobacco, right? I was smoking cigarettes. So I also used cigarettes recreationally. That was a recreational use. Could argue it was self-medication, right? And so if someone's using psychedelics recreationally, or they're doing microdosing, or they're using benzos recreationally, I think with benzos, it's a slippery slope that we should be aware of, because benzos in the brain mimic alcohol because of their effect on the GABA, right? So I think that with any of this stuff, it's best to consult someone wise about this, like hopefully like a doctor you can trust and vibe with, to help create the best life that you can live given your brain, right? And your relationship with alcohol. And so for 10, process addictions, a lot of these are normal. And it's like, I think that the human brain can be addicted. That's really how I see it. It's like everyone has the potential to be addicted to something. And it's just, how is it affecting your life? So if it's social media, or if it's Netflix, or if it's sex, or if it's gambling, it's like we can be addicted to these things. And it's like, to what level? And what are the consequences? And is it an improvement? Like, so if we're addicted to alcohol and then we're using cigarettes a lot, or we're using Netflix a lot, is that an improvement? And that's part of the growing path. It's that, you know, babies come out and they crawl first, and then they stand, and then they walk, and then they run. So maybe on the way to a healthier lifestyle, there are other things that we pick up and do, other processes that we become addicted to after we stop drinking. Maybe our relationship with sugar isn't very healthy, and then it is, right? So there might be stepping stones as we go along our sobriety journey that might actually be really helpful. And then so 11, alcohol in any form. So mouthwash, kombucha. For me, this is a hard no, but I don't judge anyone who does. I just made that decision when I got sober that I'm not doing alcohol at all in any form, and I haven't. And it really was because when I got home from rehab and I tried to use my mouthwash, which was filled with alcohol. I washed my mouth out, and it felt like I was taking a shot. And I didn't like that. It felt very triggering and unsafe to me. So I just switched to non-alcohol mouthwash. So that was a decision I made. But I think, you know, for all of these categories, we get to make our own decisions. And so for me, clearly, is sobriety non-binary? Absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of different categories that we can look at and make our own decisions within. It's quite nuanced. I think it's also important to discuss staying out of harm's way. So there's an article from the NIH, and it's talking about relapse, right? And so number one, talk to your doctor, right? Talk to your doctor. But number two, there's 3 different things here. So things to consider when you've changed your relationship with alcohol and you don't want to go back into alcohol use disorder, or you want to stay sober from alcohol, or stay sober from everything, and however you define everything, right? Number 1, re-exposure to addictive drugs. So if you are addicted to alcohol and you want to stay sober from alcohol, then that would be no exposure to alcohol, right? So that's clear cut to me. 2, stress. So this is when it becomes nuanced, because stress can be a real trigger to relapse into drinking alcohol. And there are certain things, maybe even addictions or non-sober things that we can do to help us stay sober from alcohol. It sounds weird. But like for me, I tried to quit smoking cigarettes in rehab. And then when I left rehab, I went and bought a pack of cigarettes. It was too much. It was too much all at once. I needed something else. Alcohol was self-medication for me. I needed cigarettes to help me self-medicate. That's how it felt at the time. So I continued to smoke cigarettes for the first 6 months of my sobriety. I considered myself sober at that time. I still consider myself having been sober at that time. That's how I view it. I don't consider cigarettes a relapse, but cigarettes are 100% a drug. Tobacco is a drug. There was a time in sobriety where I was using male attention, and I was getting high essentially off male attention. And then I stopped doing that. And then after that, I ate potato chips every night, and then I stopped doing that. And then I used spirituality to blow my mind on demand, and then I stopped doing that, right? So there were other things that I used pretty much the first 5 years of my sobriety. I was using other things to completely change how I felt in a potentially addictive way, or maybe even in a non-sober way, or in a way that had some consequences. Like if you eat potato chips every night, there's going to be health consequences, right? That's a lot of salt. That's a lot of fried stuff in your gut. And then you go to bed. There's going to be some consequences there on your energy, on your hormones, on your immune system, on your overall physical well-being. And so, but I didn't drink alcohol, and my goal was to not drink alcohol. And these things that I was doing were helping me not drink alcohol. And so that number 2, stress as a big trigger to drink alcohol again, can give us a little bit of leeway here on like how we're really viewing this stuff if we're, judging ourselves too much. Number 3, re-exposure to environmental cues. And this is defined as people, places, and things. So that's another thing. If you are not drinking alcohol and you don't want to drink alcohol again, it's to avoid, at least initially, or minimize exposure to people, places, and things that trigger that feeling of wanting to drink, right? So maybe not going to bars, maybe not having alcohol in your house, maybe taking a break, or minimizing the time that you spend with people who are drinking alcohol, or however that is defined. And so I'm curious what you think about this topic, because to me, 100% sobriety is non-binary. There are lines in the sand that we get to draw about what makes sense to us. And those lines might even change as we grow and we evolve. One of the lines that changed for me, everything is pretty much the same how I view it, except now two things that have actually changed for me. Number one, I'm not judgmental of other people's sobriety the way that I used to be. And the reason why I think I judged other people's sobriety before is because I was afraid for my own life, right? I was afraid for my own relapse. So if I judged other people as not doing it right or not sober or whatever, it made me feel safer, especially in the very, very beginning of my sobriety, like 2009, 2010. Certain things were not sober and it's not safe. And because if you were like me, drinking wasn't safe. Drinking, it almost took my life. I almost died from alcohol and anxiety. And so there was this huge fear in me, like a survival fear, like a phobia of anything that's putting me in harm's way is like, it's completely out and dangerous. And I have to keep even people who have that kind of thinking away from me, because I don't even want that kind of thinking to get on me because it's dangerous. So now I'm open-minded. People can do whatever they want. Like I said before, I have a lot of friends who are sober. Some of them are even in sobriety programs or recovery programs that are abstinent focused, and they're doing mushrooms once a month. Whether you'd consider that or whether they consider that recreationally or spiritually or therapeutically, I'm not sure. Or they're smoking pot, or they're taking gummies every night, edibles, THC, CBD, or some combination of that. And I think it's all a tremendous win. If you have a triumph over alcohol, it's a tremendous win. And then the other thing that's changed my mind is how I think about plant medicine. Because I'm no longer afraid of this like dreaded monster of relapse, honestly, it might not have been safe for me to think this way in the beginning. I'm not sure, but how I think today is that there are plants that are medicinal that I'm willing to use in my sobriety, because I understand sobriety at a deeper level than I did before. I understand recovery at a deeper level than I did before. There were a lot of factors that came together that pushed me to the edge where I almost drank myself to death. That included trauma, right? So there are certain plants and psychedelics that are good for resolving trauma. So to me, there are certain plants and psychedelics, quite frankly, that actually can help us stay sober. That might be vital for our sobriety, especially if we feel called, led, or guided to use them in that healing and therapeutic setting with a therapist, with a shaman, whatever it may be. So I'm definitely open-minded to that. I realize that there are people who are more binary in their thinking about sobriety who might be totally offended by my view. And that's great. That's fine. And so I'm super curious to hear what you think about sobriety. What do you consider sober? What do you consider sobriety binary? Is it non-binary? And if it's binary, does that mean that you don't even take Advil or Robitussin or coffee or any of that, right? So let me know in the comments how you're thinking about this. And I really hope, like my greatest hope with making this video, is just that anybody out there who's feeling any sort of shame or fear or guilt for the way that they are succeeding in their victory from alcohol, that may all be released, and that you feel a deeper sense of gratitude for this life that you get to live without alcohol or with less alcohol in your life. And that we can all find people in community that can be supportive of us trying to do our best and live our best without alcohol's grip over us. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, like it, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a beautiful day.